All right, I got one viewer. This is Captain Helisim coming to you from Mr. D's hangar. I'm in front of his glorious flying machine. And I wanted to share with you, at least my one viewer, something very interesting that I found to be interesting. And it has something to do with how we fly as flight simmers. And so I want to share that with you. Here's my face, as Aussie man would say. Anyway, what I've got here is the helicopter, the MD-500. Now, what you guys might have noticed when you fly this thing is that the skids move. And you may have noticed that when you see this thing fly. When it takes off, the skids move a little bit. And you wonder, when you see this thing stitched together, all riveted together, how does that work, right? I wonder that, or have wondered that. How is it that the struts move? How does it keep from fatiguing, the metal? Why is it that the skids can move? And I asked that to Mr. D, and he demonstrated how that actually works. And I want to show that to you because like I said, I find it interesting. So I'm going to look inside here, and I want to show you that there's a suspension system inside. I don't know if you can see it, but those white cylinders there at the bottom, that pair, those are shock absorbers. And they're being held in place, as you can see, by that triangular strut formation. And above that, or to the right rather, there's another shock absorber connected to the rest of the frame. And those things are connected to the skids, okay? So you question, okay, how do the skids connect to those shock absorbers, right? If the shock absorbers are inside the fuselage and they go through to the outside being there, how do you connect those shock absorbers to these legs, to these struts? How does that go through the fuselage and not mess anything up, right? Because you don't want to, how can that connect through? So here's the little trick I want to show you, which blew my mind. Mr. D, so here's the whole shock, right? Or the whole strut, rather. Here's the whole thing. Well, Mr. D pulled this down for me. I'm going to grab it because it's kind of oily. Grab it with a napkin. Okay, didn't work that way. Let's try it this way. Having a hard time moving it. Oh man, there you go. Well, I can only get it down because it's a little oily. I can only get it down this much, but as you can see, there's a hole in the fuselage. And that entire leg inside moves around in that hole. And this fiberglass sleeve just sits over the top of the rest of this leg that connects into that shock absorber. So this whole thing, this whole leg moves up and down as the helicopter body settles into landing. And that's how it's able to spread the skids out as it settles. Now, what's important about that is that when we take off in the sim, we take off from a hard surface, and you really got to kind of play with it to figure out how it is going to take off. And a lot of times it goes careening off in a different direction that you expect, and so it's very confusing. And you go, well, how do these helicopter guys do it? Well, the way they're able to do it is because before they take off, as they start to rise, the helicopter is kind of coming up and the skids are moving up, and you get an idea of how the helicopter is moving and which way the rotor is pushing. So before you leave the ground, you can center up. You have an idea of which way it wants to lean, and you can center up before it finally leaves the ground. So the skids are kind of a transition zone between ground and flying. And that short time frame, as you lift, you've got a second or two to figure out, am I leaning forward, backward, left, right? You center up, and then finally, as you leave the ground, you're already hovering, you're centered. And we don't have that luxury in flight sim. They don't have that modeled. So when we leave the ground, if we don't do it in the most gingerly way possible, we go careening off into nowhere. So that's something that needs to be modeled that is not modeled in the flight sim, or not modeled well. But that's kind of a critical element of flying a helicopter, because I suspect all of these things, maybe not this specific way, but all of these things have a moving skid system, a suspension essentially, to cushion the landing and to give you that transition when you're taking off, so you understand what it's going to do before you leave the ground. So anyway, I wanted to share that with you because I think that's really interesting. I've never taken off in this thing. I don't know how. Well, I don't think anybody trusts me to do that, justifiably. But I wanted to share that with you because I do it in the sim all the time, and it's tricky. And I think it's less tricky in the real thing because you have that transition. So just wanted to share that with you because it's really cool. I love this thing. I know you guys love this thing too. And I thought we should all, get better about understanding what's going on. And maybe between all of us, we could convince Microsoft to get their act together and model that the way they need to. So, coming to you from Lone Oak, Texas, from Mr. D's hangar. That's all I had to say about it. Hope you enjoyed it. Talk to you guys soon.